Thank you. I can't tell you how absolutely delighted I am that each one of you made it here today. I'm even more delighted that I made it here. Because when you get to my age, it's not something that you can be sure of anymore. I really do want to thank you. I am a bit nervous. I'll tell you how I'm nervous. George Clooney, whom you may have heard of, came up to me in the bar, and I had no idea who he was. George, wherever you are seated, I do apologize. I do think you're one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and I know you'll understand. Okay, we're here to launch my book called I'm Just the Guy Who Says Action, and I wouldn't be here with the book if it weren't for the man seated to my right, Nick Porgerides. How do you pronounce it, Nick?
Porgerides.
Porgerides, okay.
It's a tongue twister.
And Nick is a publicist. He had written a biography of Kenneth More called More Please, which is also a good read. And he found out that the director of Kenneth More, named The Comedy Man, was still alive and kicking, me. And so he came along and we talked about my relationship with Kenny. And then when Sean Connery died, Nick realized that I'd given Sean his first break, his first big speaking role, in fact. And so he put the press onto that. And from that, he encouraged me, together with another Nick, Nick Horn, an agent who can't be here today, but with the two Nicks behind me, I started to write the book, I'm Just the Guy Who Says Action. So I want to thank Nick for that. He'll be asking the questions. I also want to thank my son John, who's sitting here, because together we evolved that title. I think I thought of it. We've also evolved the second book, which is already in the making, called I Need Another Take, Darling. And the third book, which is I'm Also the Guy Who Says Cut. So there we are. And to my daughter Sasha and the family, whose aid with IT and all the damn things about a computer, I wouldn't be able to have written the book either. So okay, we're all set. Everyone's got the background. Fire away, Nick.
Well, look, it's a pleasure to be here. And in my hands is the actual physical copy of your book, which I hope some of you in the audience have today. And for those who don't have it, it is available on Amazon, so you can get your copy very, very soon. Let's take you back to the beginning, I guess. What made you first want to pursue a career in show business, and was there a kind of defining moment for you that made you think that's what I want to do?
No, there was no defining moment. I think I was interested. I loved going to the movies from the age of 6, and so I was hooked with storytelling from then on. At the age of 16, I started writing. I realized it was getting serious. And then, absolute defining moment, it just evolved. I became more and more. When I left university, I got a job as a newspaper reporter because there was a sort of semi-creative work. And I'm glad I did that because that meant I had, as a newspaper man, I had to pour out thousands of words a day, and so the writing process started.
Tell us about the shop that you were thinking of opening.
Okay, Nick knows this story. I'm one of six, thank you. I'm one of 7, so it shows I've never said. I'm one of 7 children. My parents had a shop, always failing. My father was always going bankrupt. My brother and I, the older brother, decided to take over the shop because he wasn't making it in life, and I wasn't making it in life. I couldn't get a job as a journalist. I was trying. So we shook hands. We said we'd take over the shop. I said I want one final weekend doing what I want to do in New York. So I went down to New York, and I saw this unknown actor called Marlon Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire. And I came out of the theater and I telegraphed my brother saying, "You have the shop. I'm going to try to get on in show business." So Mr. Brando changed my life.
Wow. And I don't think there's many who can attest to seeing Brando on stage in Streetcar Named Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. So that's
it was amazing.
Impressive.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on endlessly about that because it was T-shirt acting, as I called it, instead of an actor in collar and tie and all the middle class values. Suddenly with this guy in jeans and sweating other people, and it did change show business everywhere. He did it. So, go on.
So how did you go from Canada to the UK, and how did you wind up at the BBC?
Okay, when television was starting in both countries, but certainly in Canada, I was deemed to be not quite good enough to be a director, but they would try me as a writer. So I started writing for nascent Canadian television, and they encouraged me to come here to the UK, where, as I didn't know at the time, television, in fact, had started. Television was a British invention. So I came here, seconded by the CBC, and because of that, I had entry into everything the BBC was doing. And on the boat over, I told them people I was a writer, and they said, "You'll never sell anything in Britain." No Canadian ever does. Within 4 days of landing, I sold my first script, and I started writing for BBC drama, and from then was invited to take their producer-director's training course, which I did, and then eventually they offered me a job, which I took.
That's wonderful. I mean, cast your mind back to working at the BBC at that time, obviously a very, very different time to now. What was it like back then, and how much control did television directors have at that point?
No one can imagine the power that a television director of live television had at that time, of necessity. One man had to make the decisions, where the actors would be, where the microphone would be, where the camera would be, where the costumes would be, what the set would be like, which play he was doing. That one man was live, on air, the lights went on, you're on air. He was absolutely in control of every second of the broadcast. So go from that power to a few years later, tape has been invented. So there's no longer the power of that man, and the suits, as I call them, took over. No, we don't like that scene. Shoot that scene again, etc., etc. So the power diminished. And as one who went through 5 years of live television, I found that a very difficult transition to make, to listen to other people tell me what to do. I'm still very bad at it.
Obviously, a seminal moment in your career has to be casting an unknown extra called Sean Connery in his first leading role. Tell us how Requiem for a Heavyweight came about.
Okay, Requiem for a Heavyweight was written by Rod Serling, the American writer of Twilight Zone, etc., that some of you may remember. And I did Rod's plays, and he sent me this thing called Requiem for a Heavyweight, and I heard that Jack Palance, the American actor, had played the lead, and I said, called the agent and said, "Get Jack Palance, see if he can come over just to play the lead in this production." I was told yes. On the Friday before rehearsals were to start, I got a call from the same agent saying, "Jack ain't gonna show. We've got something better for him to do than your show." So panic. I spent the weekend searching for an actor, and my wife, my late wife at the time, playing the female lead.
That's Jacqueline Hill.
Yes. She came and said, "Have you thought of Sean?" And I said, "Don't be silly, Sean. I'd given him he'd been a walk-on, an extra for me and many others. I'd given him an occasional line." I said, "You can't give him a lead. He mumbles." Which he did. And all Jackie said to me was, "The ladies would like it," which I thought about. And that's all in the book, as you'll see. And anyway, to make a long story short, I cast Sean, and he played the lead. And from then on, went on to do a few other things, I understand. So that was the beginning.
It's quite interesting because years later, when they were looking for James Bond, and Cubby Broccoli had said to Dana, his wife, "What do you think of Sean?" And she said exactly the same as well. Jacqueline said.
Yeah.
I think the ladies will like him.
Yeah.
She wasn't wrong, really, was she?
No, she wasn't. You mentioned Cubby Broccoli. I did get a call from Mr. Broccoli when they were about to cast the Bond, and he said, "Alvin, you're one of the few people I know who's worked with all three of our contenders for the Bond part, Patrick McGoohan, Roger Moore, and Sean Connery. Tell me what you think of them." And I said, well, Roger Moore is the most affable. Patrick McGoohan is the best actor of the three. But there's something about Sean Connery which you should consider seriously. The rest is history.
Absolutely. The rest is history. What did you...
Sorry.
I was just about to say, before we're very, very lucky to actually have a sound clip from that very recording, because obviously the footage is lost. Before we go into that, tell us what you made of Sean, meeting him for the first time.
Even when he was an extra, which he was often for me and for other directors at the time, Sean had enormous presence. If he was in a room, you knew Sean was in the room. He was a very pleasant young man. There was the Canadian directors, of which there were many at the time in Britain. We used to gather every Friday night and play poker together. And Sean would come along. And he took a lot of money off me, actually. And he was always, as I say, you were aware of Sean, which is a star quality. And some of you have it. And there's this chap called George sitting out there somewhere. He has it too. You have this ability, you're there. People know you're there. And Sean had it in bagfuls, yeah. Would
you like to introduce this very rare sound clip we're going to hear?
The reason for the sound clip, there was no way of recording television programs at the time. There was this thing called telerecording, which is they literally stuck a camera in front of the television screen and filmed it. Wow. But the quality was terrible, and it could not be broadcast again because of its dire quality. Tape came along a few years later. But at the time of Requiem for a Heavyweight, 57, there was no tape, no way of recording the actual show. But the sound engineer, just before we went on air, said, "Alvin, do you want me to make a sound tape of it?" And I said, "No, forget it, who's interested in sound?" And at the last second, fortunately, I did say to him, "I've changed my mind, record the show." So this is a sound excerpt from Requiem for a Heavyweight. It's a scene in which Harlan Mountain, McClintock, Sean Connery, an ex-boxer, goes to apply for a job, any sort of job, in a state-controlled job hunting situation. The other actor in the scene is my late wife, Jacqueline Hill. Okay, Graham, action.
I've got no special problems. There was no place on that question show yours, but I was almost heavyweight champion of the world. I'm a big, ugly slob, and I look like a freak, but I was almost heavyweight champion of the world. I'd like to write that down someplace on this paper. This isn't just a punk. This is a guy who was almost a heavyweight champion of the world.
Did you hurt your hand, Mr. McClintock?
I guess I did. That's the thing of it. When you go for so long, the hurt piles up, you don't even feel them. Get out of the ring, walk back to the dressing room, and you look in the mirror. You look like somebody just run over you with a tractor. But somehow it don't seem to hurt, because there's always a reason. You know that you just took another step up. And after the last one, when the wad's all shot, and you're over the hill, and there ain't gonna be any more, then suddenly you do start to hurt. The punches you got 14 years ago, even then. And when Mason, the Doc, and Army were standing around me that night, and I heard somebody say, "He's washed up, he's finished." Then it hurts. It hurts like you gotta scream. Like now, it hurts now. Before, at least, before, every little piece of skin they took off you, it was part of the bill you had to pay. And all of a sudden, one night, you take all the 14 years and you throw them away. in an alley. And you know then that you've been paying that bill for nothing.
Mr. McClintock, I'm sure we can find you something you like. But just give us time.
Something I like. Do that, miss. I don't want much. Just the heavyweight championship of the world. That's all.
He wasn't bad, was he?
Not bad at all.
It brings back a lot of memories. Yeah.
We moved to your first foray onto the silver screen with a film called Passport to Shame, starring Diana Dors. How did that come about? What were the kind of differences you encountered between moving from television onto film?
Well, as you just said, there was a barrier between the film companies were determined to keep television at bay because television was hurting the audiences who were staying in to watch television and therefore not going to the movies. So their answer to that was to not hire any television directors. So to make the leap from television to film was very, very difficult. The first pictures I was offered, the first one was called The Flesh is Weak, which was about prostitutes in London. The second film I was offered was Passport to Shame, which was about prostitutes in London. And these cheap, low-budget exploitation pictures was all I or anybody else could get. And I decided, well, if I really want to get into films, I better do it. So I did accept the Passport to Shame.
What did you make of Diana Dors?
She was the most remarkable woman because she presented herself as this big, busted, brass exterior lady, bold. Of course, that was a pose. It was a very quiet, ordinary, sensitive woman behind all that, and we soon became friends. Yeah.
Passport has something of a cult classic now to it. It's obviously made its way to Blu-ray. It's on Talking Pictures now. How do you feel about that now, looking back?
The thing is, after a long career of directing, one is always amazed at some of the things that people like. For anyone to like Passport to Shame startles me. I mean, I did it just to pay the school fees, basically. Any reason. The main reason I did so many of my things. But the only thing about Passport that I'm proud of is the opening shot. I decided to show the feet of people and passers-by in Oxford Street. So it's a long tracking shot of policemen walking and prostitutes walking and ordinary people walking, etc., etc. That was for the opening titles. But yeah, that's about it. As I say, I'm amazed that people like it. I'm delighted, of course. I will say that again. Then years later made another piece of rubbish called Death Ship. Death Ship has become a cult movie.
George Kennedy.
George Kennedy. I've always liked working, and I still do. This the reason has kept my head going, I guess. I've always enjoyed working. I love directing. So I've always been glad to do it, but it's startling to know what the public reaction to one's work is. But there are better things that we're going to talk about today.
One of the things I found fascinating about your career, it's evident especially during the 60s and 70s, is that you gravitated more to one-off television plays. You weren't necessarily, as a lot of directors were at that period, kind of a gun for hire, moving from one series to another recurring series. Was that a concerted effort on your part to stay away from those kind of series?
Yes, to stay away from things. I was offered almost all the series that you're talking about, Coronation Street or whatever. But I thought it's not me, it's not what I wanted to do. I did, of course, start a series of my own years later called Sam Saturday, with which we did 6 episodes of it and then left. But that was a different thing. By then I was an established director. I just thought you get lost in a series listening to other people and your own voice would die, would diminish, if not die.
And you
So,
could take more ownership over a one-off play than you could
every
do
time.
a series.
Yeah, every time, even the bad ones, even the bad things that we talked about, at least I owned it with me, you know.
Would you say that it's right to say, consider yourself more a storyteller more than anything else that you've done in your career? For that reason.
That's a very flattering phrase, but I love it. Yeah. If I could be considered a storyteller, I think that's wonderful.
Well, as you know, my childhood hero is Kenneth More. I look after his estate now, and I was lucky enough to meet you through our association. And the first project that you worked with him on was Heart to Heart, which was 1964, I believe, with Wendy Craig, who I believe is
Wendy's in the audience.
in the audience today. Tell us about that, because this was a very unusual production. You called it a Eurovision Song Contest for TV plays, is that right?
Well, it was sort of a Eurovision Song Contest. It had been decided that a play would be written by each individual country belonging to the Eurovision setup, and that it would be reproduced in each country. The first country to do so would be England, or the UK, and the writer to do so was a guy called Terence Rattigan, whom the greatest respect I have and got to know very well through the years. And Rattigan wrote this play called Heart to Heart. It was basically about television, and then each country in Europe did their own production of it. And I cast Kenneth More and Wendy Craig. We were supposed to cast Richard Burton, and in fact, Mr. Rattigan and I, Sir Terence and I, flew out to Rome to see Burton, who was with some lady called Elizabeth Taylor at the time, and to convince him to play the lead, and he said yes, 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 until the last moment when he said no, and we had to look around for a star, and fortunately Rattigan knew Kenneth More, so Kenny replaced him. We worked together on it wasn't an easy show. It was, I think, 3 hours long with an interval in between. I remember working very, very well. We went well past the hours while we were in the middle, still shooting at the television center in the middle of the night. So it was a hard, difficult show, but Kenny and I got on very well together. And then he was offered this film called The Comedy Man, and he asked me to direct it. And of course, I leapt at the opportunity.
What was he like to work with, looking back now, Kenneth More?
Absolutely. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but it was wonderful. He was a nice guy. He knew his job. I think he knew that I knew my job, and so we got on extremely well, extremely well. And in that film, of course, he met his wife, Angela Douglas, and so it was a happy time. It was a happy film. When I finished it, as my usual complaint, the powers that be, the Bolting brothers, took it away and recut it. And the recut upsets me. It's all I could think about for years after. Why did they cut this scene? Why did they cut that scene? I'll give you one instance, which is that there was when they first make love, Kenny and Angela, I started with the bare feet of both of them sticking out of the bed clothing, and I had her rub her toe on the bottom of Kenny's foot. The censor made us cut that out because being too sensuous. A year later, Alan Bates and whatever his name was. Sally?
Oliver Reed.
Who? Oliver Reed. Thank you, Sally. Can't do it without my wife. We were shown naked wrestling together, but at the time it was cut, and other cuts were made that upset me. But I think we'll show the clip now, shall we?
Yeah, we should add bizarrely that film was eventually released in a double bill with another film, Lord of the Flies, which is the most bizarre combination of two films.
Terrible. They each conflicted with the other. I mean, totally different audience for The Comedy Man which would be ideal for a boy-girl date on a Saturday night, and Lord of the Flies, which is, so and to put them on a double bill, each one killed the other one. So the picture never made it to where it should have been.
But it's considered by many a classic to this day. So despite not, having the right cut,
Yeah.
your cuts, but we're going to see a clip from it now.
Okay. This clip is shows Kenny. There's many a clip that we show. It shows Kenny in search of his producer friend. He goes into a theater where an actor is auditioning. One of the actors auditioning starts to do Cyrano de Bergerac, forgets the lines, as you'll see, and Kenny takes over the speech. Okay, I think we're ready for it. Action, Graham.
Brief candle, light's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Thank you. Next, please. I would like to do an abbreviated speech from Cyrano de Bergerac.
Your secretary telephoned. She said you wanted to see me. Are you casting for a play? I'm just helping out, old man. Now, the agency called.
Let me do.
Great exciting news for you. They're on the 26 honey breath commercials.
Like the creaking vine of some tall tree.
Honey breath, they gave very good money, energy. Not this, old man. It's not for you.
These callous
Go around the office after lunch. Have a look at those, Lesnar.
Shall I snatch the back of every swine that puts up door for me? Tickle the horns of mammon with my left hand, while the right, too proud to know his owner's doing, takes in the fee? No, thank you. Shall I use the fire God has given me to burn incense all day long under the nose of wood and stone? No, thank you. Calculate, scheme, be afraid, seek introductions, favors, influences. No, I thank you, and again I thank you. But to sing, to laugh. I'm sorry, I've tried.
To sing, to laugh,
To sing, to laugh,
to walk in my own way and be
in
alone,
my own way and be alone.
free,
Free with an eye to see things as they really are.
and yet, with all
Yet,
modesty
with
to
all
say,
modesty,
my soul be satisfied with flowers, with fruit,
satisfied with flowers, with fruit,
with weeds even, but gather them in the one garden you may call your own.
Order, take one.
Honey bread, just get your honey bread. Life will be sweeter with honey bread.
One of these days I'll take up this flipping sport.
Lovely bit, isn't it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great scene, and we could easily watch more from that one. But I did want to move on to another classic film that you directed with another classic star, which is obviously Hoffman, starring Peter Sellers, which started life as Call Me Daddy. Is that right? With Donald Pleasance, which is where you won your first Emmy.
Yeah. I was working at Thames Television. I had signed, because of the vagaries of our business, a contract with Thames Television to direct anything that they threw absolute rubbish at me. And I decided the last play I wouldn't do anything unless I really wanted to do it. And so it was a rebellion between me and the management of Thames Television. And my secretary found the script. She said, have a look at this. It was at most 15 minutes. It was called Call Me Daddy. It was about a very difficult subject. A man in charge of a typing pool in an office blackmails one of his typists to spend the week with him before she marries, because he intends to woo her. I cast Donald Pleasance and Judy Cornwell, and we made this television called Call Me Daddy, which went on to win an Emmy Award for me, and great kudos for everybody else concerned. Dissolve is decided by the powers that be, Associated British Pictures, etc., to make this into a movie. They wouldn't let me take Donald Pleasence and Judy Cornwell away, which is what I wanted to do, and film a quick little low-budget film. They wanted a big star, a big film. Big star means introducing many people, and they cast eventually Peter Sellers, whom I, of course, agreed with. It was fine. At the first meeting with Mr. Sellers, the author was present of the original 15-minute sketch. The reason it became more than 15 minutes was that Donald Pleasence and Judy Cornwell and I expanded it. We kept saying, suppose you do this. It was one of those things. We did all that extemporaneous stuff, and we worked with, so it stretched to a full television hour. But the author had then taken it away and written a rather good screenplay, to be fair to him. At the first meeting with Peter Sellers here in London. Here in London, where are you all? I'm not nervous. In London, the author, Ernest Gebler, whom I shouldn't name, but I do, arrived an hour before I did and convinced Peter Sellers that I wasn't the right director for the film. So that when I arrived, I was told that I wouldn't be directing the film. And I said, who would be directing? And then to my surprise, they said, Ernest Gebler, the writer, has decided that he could do a better job than I could. And so I left startled. I did say a few words to Mr. Sellers and Mr. Gebler about that I thought was wrong, and left. The powers that be decided they didn't want this unknown writer to become the director, and that they were happy with me, and they told Peter Sellers that if he wanted me removed, he would have to pay my fee, since they could see no reason for me not to do the film. Peter Sellers was always aware of money, and my fee, I'm pretty sure at the time, was 69. It was £20,000, which is quite a hefty sum. Could buy many a house in London for that. And Peter refused to pay it, and so we met again, armed, very aware and cautious of each other. Anyway, dissolve. We started to make the film. We not only became friends, we became very, very good friends. And that friendship continued until the end of the film. When it was finally made and Peter saw it, he hated it. He said to me and to others, he was too much of himself in the film, and he didn't want it released. He would buy the negative, of course, which he didn't do. He would reshoot it, which of course he didn't do. So, as I say, it's the story of this man. Here's a scene from it. It's a very good scene between Sinead Cusack, who became Mrs. Jeremy Irons, between Sinead, who was 21 years old at the time, and between Peter. The only other thing I will say about this scene is that Peter said to me before the shooting that he felt he didn't know how he'd get the dialogue out because he'd be crying throughout the speech. And I said, the danger is that when an actor cries, the audience doesn't. So if you can, it'd be much better if you show me that you're fighting tears, but didn't actually cry. So that's the scene that you're about to see. I think the rest is self-explanatory. Okay? Action, Graham? Action?
You made a fool of me, Mr. Hoffman.
But I have treated you always with the utmost respect.
Exactly. Did you find me all that repulsive? You know, when I came here, I came prepared for the very worst. You're just a rotten hoaxer, Mr. Hoffman. You never even kissed me. I hate you. You never even kissed me.
You'll remember me, Miss Smith. You'll remember me in weeks of grinding domestic boredom when you're married to Tom's mother. You see, I wanted to show you things. I wanted to baby you. You need an older man. Will Tom brush your hair? Will Tom rub the back of your neck? You could live like a little mouse in my pocket. We'd dance and sing and drive in the sun with the hood down. I wanted a chance to show you that a man's face doesn't matter all that much. I've loved you, Miss Smith, like a doting idiot, for 18 months and 2 weeks. I wanted to woo you.
You what?
I wanted to woo you.
Get out! Go on, get out!
It's a wonderful bit of direction. I mean, I know you've already discussed Peter. I know sometimes it's a bit difficult talking about him, but on a slightly brighter note, I was around your house not that long ago, and we were in your study, and you pointed to a sound system there. Do you want to explain to the audience who have not been round as to what?
Peter Sellers is, I wanted a record player, and I told Peter Sellers that I wanted a record player, just an ordinary LP, excuse me, record player. And the next thing I knew, Peter arrived with, and he installed the whole system. So my simple record player became this fabulous, he loved sound, Peter loved dallying sound. And he ran wires under the living floor to big, to those of you who know technical things, big sound speakers, which were about 3 feet high, had speakers all over the house. So when the symphony played after that one, the equipment that Peter installed, it was remarkable. But of course I paid for it all.
And it still works to this day. It still works to this day. You know, we switched it on the other day, so you know that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, some of it still works. Not all of it.
Well, look, 1971 takes us to the release of Say Hello to Yesterday, which obviously you directed Gene Simmons and Evelyn Layen. Do you have any favourite recollections of that film?
Well, what's the time?
We're good on time.
Yeah.
We're good on time.
Say Hello to Yesterday, I wrote. Excuse me. Sorry, speaking too much. I wrote as well as directed. I wrote because a gay friend of ours, his partner had killed himself. He was a writer, Ray Matthew. Was married to Jackie at the time. She said, distract Ray in some way. So I said to Ray Matthew, let's write let's write a film together. He said, okay, it'll be about an older man and a young woman. And I said, that's too obvious. Let's make it an older woman and a young man. That'll be different. And of course it kept, and eventually we finished, it became a film, Say Hello to Yesterday, with Gene Simmons playing the older woman, and Leonard Whiting, who just done Romeo and Juliet for Zeffirelli, playing the younger man. The only remarkable thing I think that you've noticed on the film is that even Leigh's arm was broken by Leonard inadvertently. They were frolicking on the sofa, and her arm broke, and she went away to the hospital, put it in plaster, and reappeared late in the day to keep on shooting, which is a remarkable tribute to British acting talent, I think, and the diligence and devotion that actors have to their job in this country has always amazed me.
real pro, I guess, you know. You obviously, we've talked about this, you worked with some of the greats, some of the others that we haven't touched on, Henry Fonda, Rod Steiger, you know, the list is endless. But I guess, you know, we talked about my childhood hero being Kenny Moore, but your childhood hero clearly has to be Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
You worked with him on several occasions. Take us through, obviously, let's take a snapshot of one of them, Voyage Around My Father, which again led to your second Emmy win.
Yes, Voyage Around My Father did lead to my second Emmy. I think if I had to pick the one bit that I'm most proud of as a director, it would be A Voyage Around My Father. It was a privilege to work with Laurence Olivier. I admired him as an actor, unbelievable. Pretty good as a director too, done some outstanding films, even to this day when you look at them, they're amazing. So, you know, I had to be the top of my job to sort of stay with him. But I did, and consequently we did 3 films together. Towards the end of his life, he wasn't well. He wasn't well in Voyage. There's one scene in Voyage Around My Father in which he couldn't remember the lines or the moves. He was just too ill that day. And I remember turning to my assistant saying, "Have we covered every line?" She said yes. And we had covered it. I cut it together. And in the post-sync room, in the room in post-production, Olivier loved, he was the most technical actor. He loved fixing his performance. We did the voicing. It was great. Anyway, this bit that I'm going to show you is A Voyage Around My Father is a reflection of a young man about his blind barrister father. In it, this young man has come back to the house. He remembers himself as a boy. And so we start with that memory. Graham, action.
In his 6 months she married this hard-hearted girl. But it was not a Viscount, and it was not a no. It was not a baronite for a shade or two. It was the bow-legged conductor of a twopenny bus. The boy, yeah?
Yes, dear, he's here.
Don't let anyone ever deceive you into believing that the world was created in 6 days.
Would you like your copy now, dear?
The evolution of the horse was the most tortuous process. This copy's frozen, like a sort of Arctic mud.
Shall I make you some fresh, dear?
Oh, rather like it.
A bit louder, Graham.
6 days' labor wouldn't even evolve one primitive earthworm. What's more? So, now there is 6 days nonsense, What are you trying to do now? Score me to death?
The 3 of us lived in a small house, surrounded, as if for protection, by an enormous garden. My father was driven to the station, where he caught a train to London and his work as a barrister, in a great hearse-like car, which he would no more have thought of replacing each year than he would have accepted a different kind of suit or a new gardening hat. Mr. Ringer Lee, who drove it, treated the car as though it were a nervous stallion.
Come on, my old beauty. A bit frisky this morning. Want a quick rub down with the sporting life? Morning, man. Morning. Morning, Gov. Phil Austin's got a bit lame today. Going doesn't suit her. Bit heavy. Come on, my old beauty.
Mr. Thorne.
Private detective. Fine, Crawford.
Observation was commenced at 9 p.m. At 11 p.m. the wife was seen to enter the house in the company of a gentleman with a moustache who was identified as the correspondent Dacus. Bedroom light came on at 11:05 p.m. and was extinguished 5 minutes later. The next day, inspection of the bedroom revealed...
Oh, what did it reveal?
Male and female clothing.
What was that? Do speak up, dear.
Male and female clothing.
Scatter, all right, Paul.
We were able to inspect the sheets and observe...
Oh, do go on, dear.
Stains.
What was that?
Stains.
I mean, we're in 2021 now. He's still considered by many to this day as being the greatest actor that's ever lived, Olivier. What was he like working with him? You worked with him on several occasions. What did you make of him?
Well, he knew his job, and therefore he expected those around him to know their job. And if you didn't, he soon made short shrift with you. He wasn't the most tolerant man in the world, but I had the utmost respect for him. He was a great, great actor. He deserved all the accolades he got in his life. Yeah, as I said, I liked working, so he was just a joy for me to work with.
And Voyage, you said, is your favourite project you've ever worked on, is that?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think of all my work, it's the one I'm proudest of. I'm proud of his performance, the boys' performance, wonderful cast, Jane Asher, Alan Bates, etc. Elizabeth Sellers playing the wife. Wonderful people.
You moved into directing your first ever miniseries, John Mortimer's Paradise Postponed. In fact, we're lucky to have, I think, Peter Egan in the house.
He is. Hello, Peter. You're there somewhere, Peter. Yes. Anyway, yeah.
Peter, was this your first role?
No.
Oh, he's just nipped out. It's his second role.
No. Peter was an established actor by the time he did Paradise Postponed. I cast him years before. I gave him his first television, yes.
That's what I was calling on.
Earlier, yeah.
The Guardian described the series as as beautifully acted. What do you remember about the filming of that series? Obviously, you're one and only mini-series, I think, that you did.
It was long, hard work, and the company was convinced one director couldn't do it all, and they may have been right. I started shooting it in March of that year. I insisted on a 3-week break for myself and the crew in the middle of the year, and we didn't finish shooting until November that year. So it was 30-some weeks of constant directing, which is pretty hard to do. And that's what I remember most about it.
Earlier I touched on the subject of storytelling being very much obviously at the heart of everything that you've done. And now we have the guy, I'm just a guy who just says action. So I guess, what can people expect from the book? What can people expect from reading the book?
I hope they enjoy it. I hope it's a good read. I'd like to think so. It certainly kept me going in the last few months, and I think that's important to keep going, keep the head going. And as I said, I've started the next one, so that's fine.
You're obviously promising us more, which is fantastic. Be nice. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone who'd like to ask Alvin?
I've stunned them into silence.
Has he covered everything?
I've got a question now. It's Patrick.
Who is it?
Patrick Rycott, yeah.
Oh yeah, Patrick.
Would you have liked, or would you like to have done more theatre? Because I've worked with you, and you've got a genuine rapport about character and all the sort of things theatre directors often.
Would I have liked to do more theatre?
Theatre, yeah.
Is that what you asked, Patrick?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to do more of everything, yes. I really enjoyed all the media. I think I enjoyed filming most. Theater, they're all different muscles. I mean, you're a different sort of director in the theater, as even directing here, which I have done in this lovely little place. But it is different. And
yeah, I'm just wondering, because you have a great rapport with actors, and that's kind of needed in theatre. A lot of, I suppose what I'm saying is a lot of film and television directors I've worked with don't have that sort of rapport. And so I just wondered if you as a person would have have missed the other medium.
I loved, as I said, I just liked working. I always enjoyed being with actors, and I agree with you completely. I mean, I am a former president of the Directors Guild of Great Britain, so I learned a bit about other directors. Because the thing about directors is you never get to see other directors working. But as president of the Guild, I did learn more about other directors. And I think when you go on location, for instance, there's that director who immediately goes and has dinner with the crew. And then there's that director who immediately goes and has dinner with the cast. And I was one of those. I just found actors more interesting. I'm always in awe of their ability, because as you can see from my display here today, I wouldn't have been a very good actor. But so I liked actors, and I think that showed. You say rapport with actors, yes. I'm very pleased that I have this ability to communicate with actors, even difficult ones, even ones who had me fired, like Peter Sellers, eventually that I could swing around to establish a relationship, a director-actor relationship with.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You've been fired before, I believe, in your first movie in the States.
Say again?
You've been fired before, I believe, your first big movie in the States when you moved over from the UK.
Danny, I can't quite understand what you're saying.
When you moved to the US to direct movies, you also, I believe, directed a big Hollywood star who got you fired as well?
No, that happened here in Britain.
Did it?
Yes, I've been fired many times.
Don't use that as the title of the next
It's a good title. I think it's not a bad thing to be fired. It's painful as hell. It's degrading. It's crushing. But you come out of it each time having learned something. And yes, Bette Davis and I did not get on. And as I said at the time, I'm quoted as saying, I made the mistake of believing I was the director. Miss Davis made it very clear that she was in charge of everything. And I have great respect for her. I did at the time, and I told her at the time, I thought she'd done some fantastic things in her career, but we did not get on. And it was impossible. But that happened here in Britain. So being fired by Peter Sellers was no surprise. Coming back was a bit of a surprise. As I say, I was fired as a journalist from the newspaper and being told I would get nowhere by the editor. So it started even back in my early 20s of being fired and bouncing back. Hurt, as I say, pained, as I say, but still coming back. The thing is to persevere. I would urge all of you, young and old, to keep on going, if you can, please.
Okay. Alan, I have a question for you.
Go ahead. Who's that?
It's George Clooney. I look around here and I see a lot of actors that you've worked with here in this room. So present company accepted, who is the biggest pain in the ass actor?
How long have we got?
That's a good question, George. Edmund Purdom. If you remember Edmund Purdom.
The Comedy Man.
He was in The Comedy Man. He played the star, the one who succeeds in The Comedy Man, goes to Hollywood, becomes a star, and comes back. Edmund Purdom could not say a line, literally. he used to say, Alvin, say this for me, and I would say, blah, 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 and then he would go and do it that way. And I'll tell you, the funniest thing about that is he came into, there was a party scene at the end of The Comedy Man, to which Cary Grant dropped in, to name drop, in which Edmund Purdom appeared in this, I think, white dinner jacket, beautiful, beautiful dress, clothes, everything. I said, Edmund, if you had one drop of Jewish blood in you, you'd be the biggest star ever. He just seemed, he was so thick. Any ethnic group would have done, I could have named. But he was a real pain in the ass. Any other questions?
Alvin, it's Connor. Hi, Alvin. Did you have much of a relationship with composers for films you made? Did music play a part in many of your films? And
music?
Yeah, in terms of the soundtrack of the underscored film, or the relationship you had with the composers in question.
Well, as I said, Connor, the power of directors at that time, unlike now, was minimal. You know, there was no real directors' unions or anything. So we had very little say in post-productions. I wish I had more say. No, I had no say. I liked the soundtrack that was put on Hoffman, if there ever is the next time. Matt Monroe singing the Don Black song. I think that's very good. But as you and I know, because you did a musical with me in the theater here, I'm very fond of music and do think it plays an important part, and I wish I had been allowed to contribute more to the music of the films or television. The television I picked, of course, as I said, all powerful. I could pick the music and did. Because I was doing mainly American plays to start with, I always used, that's good, I've tried, New World Symphony over and over again.
Alvin,
the Dvorak's.
Can I just contradict you slightly?
So yes.
Wait
a minute, let me introduce. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for this lady.
Well, when we were the first year of our romance.
Yes. That was a long time ago now.
It was a long time ago. You were directing a Dance to the Music of Time for Channel 4. And you took me to Carl Davis's house. And I was very lucky to hear the first time that he played the theme tune to that. And you worked with him very well, I think.
Yes, you're right. I forgot that.
And also with Rex, with Don Quixote.
Oh yes, that's very good. You see what it is to have a way for a music. Carl Davis, the composer, conductor, was a remarkable experience, and Dance with Music at the time was always a joy to work with him. In Don Quixote, I was allowed to hire who I wanted, and I chose a chap called Michel Legrand. Those who know music know who he is. And I went to Paris to work with Michel, and that was a great experience. You're quite right. I've done more with music than I thought. I wish I'd done more, I guess. That's why I sort of obliterated it. We'll tell one story about Michel Legrand, if I may, which is that while I was there, we were working together. He'd been sent these lyrics by American lyricists to
Alan and Marilyn Bergman?
Sorry?
The Bergmans.
Sorry?
You have the lyricists, the Bergmans, Alan and Marilyn Bergman.
The song was...
So what was it, Windmills of Your Mind?
Windmills, thank you, sorry. Windmills of Your Mind.
This was the Thomas Crown Affair.
Sorry?
This was the theme for the Thomas Crown Affair of Steve McQueen.
But at the moment, at that moment it arrived, and Michel showed it to me and said, what do you think of these lyrics? And you just read those lyrics. I mean, they were astounding to read. I said, I don't know how you're going to find music to this. And of course he did. He was a very, very talented man. So I've worked with great talents. I have to say, and most of you I've worked with are also great talents, so thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, Alvin.
Hi, Lou.
Hello. You've worked with some incredible leading ladies, and Ava Gardner being one of them, my namesake. And I wondered what your experience was of her.
With Ava Gardner?
Yes.
Ava Gardner was a Southern belle, a lady of the highest order. She was so dignified, so graceful, and an alcoholic. So there was a problem, but she was a lovely lady. I enjoyed every minute of it. And for a star of her quality, she behaved impeccably, which most stars that I worked with did, whether it was Laurence Olivier or Ava Gardner, or Rod. I mean, some of them did. Bette Davis did. Rod Steiger didn't. There are a few that don't, but well, I love most people in the profession. I love the profession. I love my job, as I think I made it clear. I just enjoyed every second.
Ava Gardner, she especially is one of those actresses that doesn't really get the acclaim that she should do. She was Ava Gardner. She was an excellent actress,
yes.
And hopefully that will change in time. Incidentally, Hoffman is being released on Blu-ray in January, I believe. And we're hoping to do a special screening at the British Film Institute with Alvin in conversation. But Alvin, it's been an absolute pleasure. Unless we have any other questions or you'd like to add anything.
I just want to add one thing, which I do, because I don't praise my wife, Sally, who owns and runs this theatre, enough. Without her, I wouldn't be here today, and I love her beyond belief, and I'm so grateful that I met her and that we're together. And we've been together now, it seems to me like we just met the other day. We've been together now 27 years, would you believe? And we still haven't had a quarrel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Drinks time. Go, let's go.
The bar is still
Okay.
Yeah, good. You did great. Lovely. I got more of the book. Catch you soon. Thanks, Al.
That's all next to
All right. Yep. I'm sure. Graham's going on holiday, but I'll speak to him. Can I just ask you to sign quickly on this is for. No, Hugo Morley? Yeah, that's just Hugo. He asked me if I could get one. And he's going to try and come on.
No, I'm not going to go back to work. I've got a bit of crossing back and forth right now. Yeah.